my name is David Bradley. I have spent the last 20 years nearly of my life, or my retirement, working on this aeroplane here, which you see is a Bolingbroke from World War II. It was operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force, and this particular aeroplane was a submarine hunting aeroplane, initially in the Atlantic, and then later in the war it took part operating for the US Air Force to look for Japanese submarines off Alaska, a photograph of which we have of the aeroplane at that time. The aeroplanes it's a big aeroplane, it's very small inside, there's not a lot of room inside for the pilot and the gunner, we have down the front of the aeroplane is a navigator and a bomb aimer, and on the back of the aeroplane there is a gun for a gunner. So we have three people in the aeroplane, a pilot, a navigator and bomb aimer man, and a gunner. It's a pilot of three. During the war in Europe, a lot of the Bolingbroke's flying in this country came back to land with a completely dead gunner in the back of the aeroplane, and that was a regular thing. And it got to some stages in the war where the Blenheims in this country, which is the same aeroplane, were actually grounded because they had run out of gunners completely, because they'd all been killed all the time, because the aeroplane chases them from behind, and he's at the back of the aeroplane, he gets killed, and the pilots carry on and land only to find that there's a dead man behind them. And there's certainly some of the airfields here shut down completely because they had no gunners left and they couldn't do any more operations, and that was not uncommon during World War II. This aeroplane came from Canada. On the side of the aeroplane we can read the number 9048, which is its serial number. We know that this aeroplane was about the 55th or 60th aircraft built. We don't know the exact number on the line, but it was approximately the 55th to 60th aeroplane. But as I say, we can't identify it accurately. It was used in the war initially for flying, looking for German submarines off Labrador in the Atlantic. And then when the Americans came into the war as a result of the battles in Honolulu, they realized they didn't have any aircraft that were capable of looking for submarines or pilots who knew how to do it. So they hired several squadrons, I believe it was 3 squadrons, of Canadian aircraft to do the job for them. So our aircraft was in one of those squadrons, and the aircraft were then flown right across the States. They had some American equipment put into them in Vancouver, and then they flew up to Alaska, where they were then looking for submarines. And we do know that one submarine was put out of the war by one of these airplanes, not this particular one, but he got enough bombs to bring it to the surface and it couldn't go back down again. And it limped home because the pilot ran out of bombs. And but that was found in the records in the harbours in Japan at the end of the war, when the Americans went in to take every military aircraft out of the harbours and sink them out at sea, so that the Japanese had no chance of using them again. So, as we said, we know this aircraft was delivered around about the back end of 1941. Don't know the exact date because we don't have the records. And it survived, and of course during that period it was painted in the standard RAF paint scheme that was used in this country, and there are traces of that underneath the yellow paint that you see on it now. The yellow paint all the way up here is it was used as a training aeroplane. So the Americans, after the Pearl Harbor, they were in a hell of a rush to try and find their own aeroplane for searching for submarines, which they did, and they found an aircraft that was more suitable than this for it, and much newer in design and type. And so the aircraft were painted yellow and put on to training in the middle of Canada. And so this aircraft became a trainer for probably many hundreds of pilots. During World War II, something like 99% of our pilots were trained in Canada. We don't know the exact numbers, but it was not quite 100%. And the bomb aimers and the gunners and all the people who maintained them were also trained in Canada. I have a book at home which tells me that 330,000 British people were trained in all these skills in Canada during the war. We couldn't do that in England because there was too much. We couldn't, for instance, train people to fly aircraft in England because all the airfields were on a minute's notice for takeoff. If there was a squadron of Messerschmitts coming, you had to be in the sky in seconds. And if you've got a collection of tiger moths training flying around the airfield, what are you going to do when you want 15 Spitfires off the ground in 30 seconds? You can't do it. So all training for pilots and servicing of aircraft and everything else was done in Canada. Hence the huge numbers of people. Some of them lost their lives in ships on the way across the Atlantic, but that was the norm in the day. So at the end of the war, there were these large numbers of these aircraft that were in the middle of Canada, which is, if any of you have been looking at this now, if you have been to the middle of Canada, there's nothing there except grass. There's not even a bush or a tree or anything, there's nothing. So they had complete land to put aircraft on. They were left, and at the end of the war they tried to sell them to local farmers. We're not too sure of the prices, but we believe it was something like $15 and $25, depending on the size of the aeroplane. Now that doesn't seem very much money, but in Canada in those days, people were probably earning $5 a week to live on. So spending $25 on an aeroplane was a lot of money. But they just wanted to get rid of them because the nearest scrap yards were about 1,500 miles away. And the cost of shipping them to the scrap yards was so excessive, they decided to smash them all up where they were in the middle of Canada. And the end result is that a lot of parts of these airplanes have survived in Canada, as did ours, in pieces, and they have been collected up for all different types of airplanes, and many of those have been rebuilt elsewhere, all around the world. There are now several so-called Blenheims in museums around the world. They are all Canadian Bolingbroke's, all from the middle of Canada in World War II. There are no British-built Blenheims in existence. There is one Blenheim in Finland, which was built by the Finns themselves and is on display in a museum in Finland.